How I found out about my wife's affair. I'm writing this because I was shocked by the way I found out about my wife's years-long affair behind my back. There are two parts to this story. The first part is not as shocking and explains how I found out about her affair the first time, and the second part is about how I found out the second time, which is truly mind-blowing. Part 1. It all started when I was living in South Korea, teaching English. I met my wife there, she's Korean, and the relationship started off well. We had our fights, but we loved each other, or at least I thought so. After a few years of marriage, we decided to move to the United States. I was tired of teaching English as a profession, and she wanted to become a nurse in the US. She had been an emergency room nurse in Korea. Her English was okay, but she wanted to try to become fluent. So, before we immigrated, she started studying English and attending a language academy where she spent long hours. After some time of her studying there, before we moved back to the US, I started noticing some changes in her. First, in Korea, there's a messaging app called KakaoTalk. It's used almost universally. Think of it as the Facebook Messenger of Korea. She used to always have a picture of us as her profile picture on the app. She made sure I had our picture up as well. Then one day, I noticed she had removed all pictures of us from the app, and I asked her about it. I forget what excuse she came up with, but when I asked her to put our picture back, she flatly refused. I think she pretended it wasn't a big deal and that I was making too much of it. I knew something had changed, and I noticed her attitude towards me became more confrontational and demeaning around this time. However, I still didn't suspect an affair. I should have, but she always said she loved me very much and would never cheat on me. I guess I believed her. There were a few nights when she didn't come home. Each time, of course, she came up with a plausible excuse. The night I found out, she said she was going to stay at her sister's house because she had to take her sister and her husband to the airport early in the morning. This was probably the third or fourth time I had to stay in the apartment alone, and that night I felt lonely, so I sent her a message on KakaoTalk. Not only did she not reply to my messages on Kakao, but I realized she hadn't even read them, because the app lets you know if a message has been seen or not. I later found out she had blocked me, so she didn't even receive the messages. I called, but there was no answer. I waited a bit longer and called again. Of course, no answer again. Also, on Kakao, you can see who is currently active on the app. I saw that her sister, who she claimed she was supposed to be staying with, was on the app. I called her sister and asked if she was there, explaining that she had told me she would be staying there tonight. Her sister seemed shocked, and from her tone and response, you could tell she knew nothing about it. She hadn't seen my wife and didn't know where she was. I didn't know it at the time, but after my phone call with the sister called my wife and wanted to know what was going on. My wife probably lied to her just as she had lied to me, but her sister convinced her that she needed to call me. So, my wife calls me, and I was furious because I knew she had lied to me. I told her she had better come home now, or our marriage was over. When she got home, she told me to sit in her car and started telling me a story, which she probably told her sister as well, about how she didn't want to tell me, but she was hanging out at a club with some single friends. She made it seem like she was just helping them meet guys and wasn't looking for anyone herself. I said, "Give me your phone," and essentially snatched it out of her hands. I opened the KakaoTalk app, clicked on the first conversation, and started scrolling through it, taking pictures. Only then did the real truth come out. The messages I was photographing were from a teacher at the language academy she was attending. I only got a few pictures before she took the phone back, crying and begging me to stop because she didn't want to hurt me anymore. But the pictures I had definitely told the story. They were having a sexual relationship, and he was the one she was with that night. So, she confessed that she liked him and had an affair with him. I was completely devastated. We were literally supposed to go to the US together in a month. Her green card had already been approved. And I really had no one there for support. You see, in Korea, teaching English is usually temporary. The academies give native English speakers one-year contracts, and most people go back to their home countries after a year or two. By then, I had been married for 3 years and hardly ever went out. Most of my friends had been long gone by that time. She begged me to forgive her, and said she was sorry and it would never happen again. You know the drill. At first I said, "No way." I was going to leave alone. But I was completely heartbroken. It was like my whole world had collapsed. After a while, I just couldn't bear the thought of that 18-hour plane ride alone. I was a total mess. So I decided to give her a second chance. We stayed together and moved back to the US. Part 2. The first year back was pretty tough. Finding a job outside of teaching with a resume limited to my time teaching in Korea was not easy. I ended up surviving mostly by doing delivery and gig work. Then we were forced to move in with my parents due to financial difficulties. There, I got a job at a very good company that I had worked for a year before going to Korea. If I had been smart, we would have stayed with my parents for a while from the beginning and gotten settled there. Anyway, after working there for a year, my wife got a job there too. Now, with both of us earning a good income, we moved into our own apartment. Things seemed to be going well. However, we still had occasional fights, and sometimes it felt like she was deliberately pushing me away. Some of the things she got mad about made me scratch my head and think, what the hell is she complaining about that for? I remember one time, I would always leave my Monster Energy cans by the sink so I could pour them out the next time I did the dishes. I usually never finished the whole thing, and would just leave them by the sink. She had never, as I recall, said anything before about not wanting me to do that. But one day, she just snapped and said in an angry tone something like, "Why do you leave them there? I told you not to do that. Pour them out in the sink right now, or next time I'm going to pour them all over your pillow." When she got angry, she was very demeaning and would say all sorts of nasty things. She would apologize later, but because of our constant fighting and growing apart, we decided to get a divorce around the fall of 2024. She had been going to Korea for a few weeks to visit her family and friends almost every year since we moved to the US. That year, 2024, she was going back in the winter. At that point, the divorce proceedings were still ongoing. We were still living together because neither of us had the money to break the lease and move out. And we were living like friends, even friends with benefits. I still loved her, after all. While she was in Korea, she called me one day, crying, and said she had received an angry KakaoTalk call from the wife of the man she had cheated on me with 4 years ago. My wife claimed she confessed everything that had happened between them to the woman. She later said the woman sent her a legal notice threatening to sue her. That's right. Although adultery is not a criminal offense in South Korea, apparently it is still a civil offense, and you have the right to sue the person your spouse cheated with for damages. To an American, this seems very strange, but it's true. You can do that in South Korea. I was stunned. She had to tell me because she was now afraid of the legal consequences, and needed money to pay for a lawyer for her defense. She asked for my help in getting a 401k loan from work to pay for it. I asked her how his wife could have found out about something that happened years ago. She explained that they had communicated about their affair through essays she wrote while attending the language academy, and that she must have read them. So I thought maybe he cheated again recently in a similar way with another student, and she found out. Then she started digging through his files and found these essays. I really questioned the timing of it all. It seemed very strange that she would suddenly contact my wife at the very time my wife was in Korea. I mean, what are the odds? She could have found out about his affair at any time in the last 4 years, but she found out while my wife was in Korea. It really seemed like strange timing. It seemed more likely that maybe something happened between my wife and him while she was there, and the wife found out. I mentioned this to my wife, but my wife insisted that there had been no meetings or communication with him since the initial affair happened before we came to the US. So, foolishly believing her, I could only think that he must have cheated again, and then she dug through his files and found out about my wife and him from years ago. Since she was already there, she used her credit card to hire a lawyer. She had me sign over the rights to sue the guy she cheated on me with on my behalf. Since we were still legally married in Korea, I could sue him. I didn't really want to be involved, but all I had to do was agree to let her file the suit, and then she would take care of it. A couple of months went by, and then the guy she cheated on me with, of course, found out that I was suing him. So I don't know how, but he somehow got my email address and contacted me. What he told me put me in a state of complete shock. He, of course, apologized and was very sincere. He told me that they had met when she went back to Korea in late 2024. She had contacted him the day after arriving in Korea and wanted to meet. At the time, he was trying for a second child with his wife and was reluctant to meet her. But he was worried that if he ignored her, she might escalate the situation further and even involve his wife. They had lunch together, and she wanted to have sex with him, but he pretended to ignore her and dropped her off at a subway station. A few days later, she sent him a message saying she still had deep feelings for him and asked if he felt the same way. She wanted to meet and have sex. Trying to finally set things straight, he told her directly that he had no feelings for her and didn't want to meet her anymore. It was then, apparently, that my wife flew into a rage. My wife must have gotten his wife's phone number from his car or perhaps found her by name on Kakao. It turns out, my wife is the one who contacted his wife and confessed everything. I know because I asked the man for proof. He sent me pictures of the messages my wife sent to his wife on Kakao. So it turns out, this man's wife would have never known if my wife hadn't contacted her. After his first email to me, before he even answered my follow-up questions, it hit me. What he was saying was far more plausible than what my wife was telling me. Indeed, something had happened between them the last time she visited Korea. The confession my wife made to his wife is legendary. Feeling betrayed by him, she explained everything to her. It details how they continued to communicate through Instagram, Snapchat, Google Docs, etc. all these years. They met in 2023 when my wife went to Korea, and my wife even booked a hotel. It's perfectly clear from her confession that she was deeply in love with this man. She was even getting online tutoring/sex talk lessons from him until about the summer of 2024. All this time, she claimed there had been absolutely no contact between him and her since the initial affair in 2020. Now, armed with the evidence and still in shock, I knew I had to confront my wife and give her one last chance to confess. So I told her something was bothering me. I explained that the timing of how his wife found out about their affair from 4 years ago, while my wife was in Korea, just didn't add up for me. I told her it seemed much more likely that something had happened between him and her when she was in Korea, and his wife found out. She still denied that anything had happened and still stuck to her story that they had never met or communicated since we moved to the US. Well, now I had the proof. So I told her directly that I knew she was lying and showed her the evidence. Only then did she confess. I know it's always interesting to find out how people learn their spouse is cheating on them. But it just blows my mind how this all went down. If my wife had never, in a fit of rage, contacted his wife and confessed, and if this were any other country that doesn't allow you to sue the person your spouse cheated with, I would have never known. It was only because of that lawsuit that he would have ever contacted me and told me the truth. I know I wasn't the best husband, and communication was always an issue because of the language barrier. I think that at the time she was studying at the language academy, they must have really bonded. He probably connected with her emotionally in a way I never could. He spoke her language, listened to her, comforted her. So she developed a deep connection with him. That's why she was so hurt when he pushed her away in the end. This is my story, and I hope it helps someone out there.